Hey, what's going on, y'all? Welcome back to another episode of CrashinConvos. In this episode, we have Jonathan Hagermen, who is the founder of the Directories Project, which is a 501c3 nonprofit organization whose mission is to introduce veterans into mountain biking and get them in the outdoors to help them find their path and purpose for themselves. In this episode, we get into Jonathan Hagermen's story while he was in the Marines, how TDTP started, and how it continues to help himself and veterans to this day. If you're watching this on YouTube and wish to listen to car on the way to the trails or however you choose to podcast, check us out on Spotify or any streaming apps. Just search CrashinConvos. Or if you want to see our faces, you can check us out on YouTube. Just search CrashinConvos. Thank you for joining us. And without further ado, Jonathan Hagermen. You comfortable?
I'm good, man.
You good?
Yep. Are you comfortable?
Now that you're here.
Now that I'm here?
Yeah.
Or not that I'm here?
Now we're not, depending on who you ask.
Yeah.
So, man, we've been trying to do this for a while now.
Yes,
and
sir.
I'm glad you're here. I appreciate you driving through the traffic, as I know it is, that this area is developing. And it's, I guess depending on what side of it is, either way, traffic sucks. And then plus you got the other traffic from base, Lackland.
Sure.
Yeah, but... and it was rain, so I definitely appreciate it.
Yeah, it's good, man.
Yeah. Thanks for coming. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah. So, as some of you may know, this is Jonathan Hagermen from the Directories Project, founder. There he is with the thumbs up. That's a signature sign.
Yeah.
That one too. But yeah. So I mean, I've been wanting to have him on for a while, and I think it was supposed to happen right now. And what I mean is because we've had some time, to get to know each other, and
Sure.
Especially in some of the trips, and kind of going back every time there's some type of event that we host or what have you, or the program hosts. It's always surreal to kind of go back to Bentonville, which
Sure.
yeah, just the way all that happened, and then kind of hear a little bit of the backstory on that. So yeah, I guess we'll kind of start out with your background a little bit. I know it, but not everyone here knows it. So I know you're a Marine, and I know your background, as I already stated.
Mm-hmm.
So you just get into that a little bit, and then how that kind of culminated into the Directories Project.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I don't know how far back you want to go. August 5th, 1987, beautiful day,
Hey, you can go back as far as you go on, man.
No, so, I was born into a military family. My dad was in the Air Force, active duty. He was stationed over in Germany at the time. I was born in Hamburg. Not Hamburg, but Homberg. So it was like a civilian hospital, born off base. But, born in Germany, came back to the States. Desert Storm kicked off, Desert Shield, Desert Storm. My dad deployed to that, Saudi Arabia. At the time, we were in South Carolina. So, some of my very earliest memories in life are down at the beach, down at Myrtle Beach, surfing in the waves, hanging out with my dad. Mom and dad just kind of hanging out, having a good life. Dad deployed. Mom and I moved home to Salt Lake. That was where her parents were and where they had both grown up, actually. He got home, they separated, and then for, the rest of my life, I primarily lived with my mom for the school year, and then I'd go stay with my dad and stepmom and my siblings, my, step siblings, for holidays, summers, things like that. So really has no impact on, the rest of my story, but that's just kind of the background.
Yeah,
so,
I got you.
It was kind of neat because I got to experience a lot of different things. So as a kid, my home base, like I said, was in Utah. For a while, my dad was in North Carolina, and then they went to California, Citrus Heights, California, not right out of Sacramento. That's kind of where I would say where I got into biking. BMXing was a big scene in California. I never raced BMX. I'm not a racer, but I had a BMX bike, and I made some friends, and they knew where all the local jumps were, and we'd go screw around on those a little bit. So that was kind of my first intro. And then, it was when my dad was living there in Southern California, in Central California, that I got my first mountain bike. So I think I was in,
What kind of bike was it?
it was a Mongoose.
Nice.
Full suspension, Y-frame Mongoose from Toys R Us.
Nice.
Yeah, so I was like flipping through the, the ads. My birthday was coming up, and I see this bright yellow Mongoose mountain bike. It had the bullhorn, handlebar extensions. I could grab onto those. I was like, whew, that bad boy right there. That's it.
Bullhorns, I'm all in.
That's the money maker, baby. So I got that for my birthday. Riding that around. As I got older, I kind of saved some money, bought a little bit of a nicer bike. It was a Schwinn Mesa GSX. So it was a hardtail, entry-level Schwinn hardtail. Bought it from an actual bike shop. I felt legit on that. Rode that around everywhere. And that was probably in when was that? Like 2002, 2003. And that's about the time the free ride scene kind of started getting some traction and some exposure everywhere, right? Rampage was a couple years after that. There was New World Disorder. There was Free Wheel Burning was one of my favorite videos. And I thought for sure I was going to be like this free rider, right? Here I am on this Schwinn hardtail, and I'd go ride it to the mall, and I'd huck it off of a loading dock for a semi, and did that a couple times and broke some handlebars, did it a couple more times, broke some crankshafts. And so, eventually I saved up enough money to buy myself a nice full suspension bike. It was, the premier free ride bike of the day, 2004 Kona Stinky.
Oh, nice.
Black and orange model. Absolutely loved that thing. Got into a lot of trouble on that thing. Jumped off a couple roofs on that thing, which is probably where I got my first screws loose, I think, came from crashing that bike.
Yeah.
But, that's just like a crash course into my, my bike history, I guess. If you want to fast forward through that. So I grew up biking, grew up in Utah, spent a lot of time on a bike. Right after high school, I actually served a mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Mm-hmm. Those are 2-year missions, if you're not familiar with that. You basically send in some paperwork. You're like, hey, I'm eligible and I'm willing to go serve. And wherever you guys tell me to go is where I'm going to go. And so I got my mission call back, and I sat down, and I was super excited about it. I had my dad on the phone, and I opened it, and I started reading. And it's like, you've been called to serve in Sweden, the Sweden-Stockholm mission. And at that time, dude, I was like, my mind was blown, right? I had to go get a map real quick and flip it open. Obviously, I knew Sweden was in Europe somewhere, but it's like, okay, where is it? It's not by Germany. Nope, that's Switzerland. Okay, where's Sweden? Okay, it's up in Scandinavia. So spent 2 years of my life over there, having a good old time, beautiful country, beautiful people. Came home, and then almost immediately, I'd say within 2 months coming home from that, almost immediately enlisted in the Marine Corps. Now, this was the second time I had tried to enlist in the Marine Corps. The first time, I was 17 years old, in high school, had talked to the recruiter, had picked out my MOS. In Utah, they pushed this big thing. Well, you can sign up in the reserves. You can go to boot camp, and then you can request a 2-year, I guess that would be like a leave of absence or something, but like you're excused from your drill for 2 years, which counts as inactive reserve time. But that would then allow you to serve a mission for the church. And so I was like, hey, yeah, that sounds perfect. Let's do that. So I went down there, picked my job. I was going to be an LAV crewman. Went to MEPS, and a couple of things came up in my medical history when I was a little kid, and they're like, "Hey, we need to get an additional waiver for this."
That roof.
Is that roof, dude?
Yeah.
Yeah, man. Blink. We've got to get an additional waiver, and both your parents have to sign that. And so I was like, okay, whatever. So they pulled me out of the main group that was there in MEPS, and I went and sat in the recruiter's office by myself. And after about, 20 minutes or so, they come back in. They're like, "Hey, do you want to call your parents? Because we've tried talking to them, and they're not signing this document." I was like, "Oh man!" So I called my dad. And I was like, "Hey, what's going on? You guys have already said this is okay. You've already given me permission. I'm down here. I'm at MEPS, right?" And he's like, "Yeah, I'm sorry. Your mom and I agreed, and we prayed that if this wasn't the right thing at the right time, that something would come up and it would stop you from enlisting today." So they're saying, their viewpoint was, this is God's intervention. Like, you shouldn't be joining the Marine Corps right now. I was like,
Also, that one thing that popped up, they saw that as a sign.
right,
Like,
yeah. And so they're like, yeah, we're not going to sign any waivers.
Right.
No, this is our answer. And so, sorry, bud.
Yeah.
And, I don't know if you've ever had to walk out of MEPS. Obviously not, but like, you go down there to enlist, right? And then that obviously didn't happen. And so I'm like walking out, tail between my legs, absolutely embarrassed, 17 years old. It was a tough pill to swallow for sure.
Yeah.
It was a good pride check. But, it all ended up okay. So, like I said, served my mission, got home, enlisted almost immediately after. Mom still cried about it. Didn't know why I was joining the Marine Corps. Dad was not over the moon about it, but supported my choice. So I guess that's where my journey began, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, for me, so as you were talking about that, I was thinking about when I was about to join, or it was different circumstances. My mom wanted me to get out of the military. I mean, not out of the military. She wanted me to get out of my neighborhood.
The house.
Yeah, the house. Get the hell out of here. I'm tired of your ass. Drinking all the milk and eggs. Or I'm not drinking eggs, but yeah, she just saw that there wasn't any future for me immediately. And I'm pretty sure she was more aware of what I was doing than I thought she was. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Moms always know, right?
Yeah. Yeah. But, so yeah, it was my junior year, I think. She was it was summer my junior year, and she was like, what are you going to do? And I'm like, I know I didn't want to go to school. So long story short, she was like, I think you should go to the military. And I don't know what, of course I was young and dumb, so we got a big old argument over it. And then, I wasn't going to go, and that was it. Right. And just things started changing my mind, I mean, whether you want to call it divine intervention or what have you. It was kind of opposite. We weren't talking for a bit, and that's just pride and ego, right? On my part. I'm pretty sure it was a lot of dumb stuff, but she made me go, not made me, made me promise her prior to the argument. I think she was very religious, and she made me go to, or not made me, I promised her I was going to go with her to a Billy Graham revival or what have you. And this was here in San Antonio at the Alamo Dome. And I went with her, and there was a major talking on stage, and she, said some things that kind of just started to kind of untie some things, whatever thoughts I had in my mind. And I, of course, prideful, I didn't tell them I was going to join. Yeah. And I went to go talk to them prior to. I was 17 when I graduated, so I couldn't go without their permission. And I didn't want them to know. So I did the DEP program. Long story short, I joined in about, 6 weeks or a month before I left. I told them, yeah, I'm leaving the basic. And they were like, what? But I think they were like, it's that double-edged sword, right? You want them to go when they tell you, it's like, But yeah, it's crazy. Things happen for the way they happen, and it's 20, a little over 20 years later. But yeah, it's crazy because you talked about this intervention, right? Because if you would have left when you were supposed to, that could have set you on a different path. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? I don't know if you ever think about those things, those things that happen in your life that kind of just, I mean, it's always right what it could have, should have, right? But I don't know. I kind of get stuck on some of those things. If this wouldn't have happened, what would have happened? With the TDTP Dirt Therapy Project, would that have, came to you in the way it did? Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, I think back on it a lot. And, before I jump into this next thought train here, I'll preface it by saying, I'm happy to participate in the podcast as me, not as the founder of the Dirt Therapy Project. I'm super happy to talk about it. We can discuss that. Absolutely. Just important to call out, explicitly that these are my viewpoints, right, and don't necessarily reflect the program, right? Right. I'm my own entity in person. The Dirt Therapy Project is its own entity, and I have to take a little bit of a different viewpoint when running that. Right. But I still have my own personal viewpoint. So, to your point, I'm very much a believer that God, or whatever the higher power is you believe in, for me, it's a God, micromanages our lives. Now, I think that we often have a perception that micromanagement has a negative connotation to it, which I think it usually does. But I don't think that in the context of having God involved, right? Because to your point, what if I had joined earlier, or what if I had done this, or what if I had done that, and I sit here and I look back on my life and just think and see all of these incredible things that have happened, and know that, some of those I made an active decision and it turned into something great. And some of them, the decision was made for me, i.e. joining the Marine Corps at 17, didn't work out, right? Like, try as I might, it wasn't in the cards for me.
Right.
And what would have happened? What would my MOS have been? Where would I have deployed? Would I have deployed? I certainly wouldn't be who I am today if I had done something different back then. And so, like I said, that's my viewpoint on that.
Yeah, no, and
thanks for coming on my TED Talk.
Thanks. I'm here all night, folks. But yeah, I think about that often too, and and just side note, but yeah, oftentimes when I talk, like I know I'm kind of integrated with the Dirt Therapy Project. I have been for a while, so I usually every so often remind people like, hey, this is separate from that program.
Sure.
This is my viewpoints and how I think. So this doesn't reflect the program. Anywho, but yeah, I do feel that way. There's a lot of things that happen in my life that, and for a while I was brought up with God, the idea of God, and in a lot of ways I don't want to say negative, because it was like forced in a lot of ways, like like it was this or you're going to hell, or vice versa. So it was just always like, man, I'm never gonna make it to heaven. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, I can't live this perfect life. So long story short, like fast forward, a lot of experience, a lot of time, a lot of talking to different people, and I remember learning about school in school about what is it called? Something predestiny, pre-manifestation. I forget what it is, but the idea that something like your path is already
sure. You're predestined to make the decisions that you're going to make.
Predestiny, I think that's what it was.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, with that, there's a lot of things that have happened in my life that through experience and thought and questioning decisions or anything, or like somebody saying something or having me hold to stay somewhere longer, or even like stop loss. Right, I got stop loss after September 11th, and if I would have got out after my 4 years, I had a job lined up. Right, I was in comm. I was gonna make a lot of money. Right, at least I thought, and
sure.
then. It was right when September 11th happened. A lot of the markets crashed. And a lot of communication industry, like Nortel, they let go of a lot of workers. So if I would have got out, I would have probably maybe had a job for a little bit, and then I would have been let off. Laid off, and then I wouldn't. And when I re-enlisted, I was deployed because I was like, well, I might as well re-enlist. I'm already here. So that was like 8 months later, and I was able to do 20 years, and I was able to kind of, I don't know, just have a different lens and view of the world. That took me places that I would have never been able to afford to go to. You know what I mean? And
yeah.
But it's these things that happen. I mean, I'm not saying that I'm glad that September 11th happened. But at the same time, it's just like, if these things that happen that are out of control is what keeps our life in control, I guess, in the path that we're supposed to go to. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But so you join, you deploy, and I'm pretty sure that experience was on its own, like, life-changing in many ways. At least, I mean, every time I deployed or I got to see a different country or a different culture, that always changed me, because I just thought of the world differently at the time. But Yeah. So.
Yeah, I mean, deployment was its own beast, right? And in hindsight, I find it interesting, and I think about it fairly often that like my life went from one end of a, if we'll call it a spiritual spectrum, it went from one end to another in a very short amount of time, right? So 2006 to 2008, I'm serving a mission, white shirt, name tag, tie, knocking on doors, talking to people, spreading the message about Jesus Christ every day for 2 years, right? Come home, enlist, and I kid you not, within 18 months after leaving Sweden, getting back to the States, within 18, 24 months, I'm boots on ground in Afghanistan in an active war zone. Mm-hmm. Right. And just the hindsight of that, looking to that, is like, man, that was crazy. And not only that, that time in Afghanistan was one of the most, what do you want to call it? Active zones in Afghanistan. Right. So I deployed with a unit. Let me back up. I finished my schooling in the Marine Corps. They tell me, hey, you're going to Miramar. I was like, I don't know where the Miramar is. Right? Well, it's in Southern California. It's going to be sweet. My orders actually said 11th Dental Battalion. And like everybody in my class is laughing about that. My instructor's like, my MOS, I was a generator mechanic. I worked on mobile power systems. And they're like, yeah, I don't know what you're doing at a dental battalion. Maybe you'll be working on gear or something. I was like, yeah, I don't know either. Yeah. So I get on a plane, and then I get on a shuttle, and I show up to Miramar. And I'm at the IPAC, and they call my unit, and they come and pick me up, and like, oh yeah, it's not. I don't know why it says 11th Dental. You're with CLC 11. We're a groundside maintenance unit. Okay, perfect. Made a lot of sense. And their parent unit was CLR 15 up at Camp Pendleton. So here we are, a very small groundside maintenance detachment on an air wing installation. Our parent unit is up on Camp Pendleton. I don't know, 35 miles north of us. And I check into my unit, and they're like, hey, we're groundside maintenance. You're on an air wing. Things are a little relaxed here, especially as far as the Marine Corps is concerned. And this unit is non-deployable. I was like, oh, well, that really sucks.
All right.
Right? Because, in my mind, you don't join the Marine Corps unless you are wanting to deploy. Mm-hmm. Right? Like, if you want to go overseas, you join the Marine Corps because you know that you'll get a rotation overseas. Right. So I checked in. They're like, yep, non-deployable. I said, oh, that's a bummer. And then within 3 weeks, I was in my staff sergeant's office. He's like, hey, they're looking for volunteers to deploy with CLR 15. Do you want to go? I said, yep, sign me up. Absolutely. Little Lance Corporal at the time, raised my hand. Yes, I want to deploy. I was engaged. Let me get my timeline figured out here. Checked into my unit in February. Was asked to deploy in April. Got married in May, and then by September, I was in Afghanistan. So very quick turnaround, right? And when we get over to Afghanistan, they're like, okay, CLR 15 is the main maintenance, third echelon maintenance shop on Leatherneck. That's what they're going to be doing. Mm-hmm. Motor team maintenance, generator maintenance, AC stuff, all third echelon. But we're sending a few of you to Sangin. We're going up to Nole. And like, I didn't know what that meant at the time. I was chosen to go to Nole. There were 4 of us. I was like, okay, yeah, whatever. I don't know what that means, right?
Right.
Like, might as well be telling me these things in German or
right.
Whatever. So
it's a different war.
Yeah, exactly, right. And so, we get on a helicopter. We're at the Agdag. We get on a helicopter. We're flying in. We touch down in Nole. And as we're coming in, they start giving these instructions like, okay, as soon as we touch down, get off immediately, right? Because we're going to touch down and then we're going to go because this is like a hot zone.
Right.
And so they touch down, we're jumping off, we're throwing our bags off, helicopter takes off immediately. All that happened within like, I'd say 90 seconds. And then we're just kind of standing in the middle of this landing zone. I don't know what we're doing here. And then luckily a few of the guys from the unit that we were replacing came out and like, hey, we'll show you guys where the tents are and where you're going to be sleeping and all that stuff. And then the next day they gave us a tour of the little fob that we were on. Nole had basically been this like drug lord compound in Sangin. So it's all mud huts, mud walls that are separating the different sections of the compound. The COC was in what I have to assume was like the main house on the compound. It was nicer mud, I guess, and some tiles that they had like slapped onto the mud.
We only find the finest muds around here.
Yeah, it was like extra strained or something. Yeah. They put it through a strainer one more time. Anyway, we took some RPGs to the COC a couple days ago, so that's why that touchdown was super fast, and you guys had to take off. And you're like, okay, cool, sounds good. And Nole, I tell people this. There was no running water on Nole. We ate MREs, and once in a while we'd have a UGR from the chow hall. Sorry, this is annoying. My watch is going off. Let me mute this real quick. I hope you can edit this out. When you had to go to the bathroom, you went and used a piss tube, which was basically a piece of PVC that somebody had jammed through the mud wall to the outside of the mud wall, and you pissed in it, and there it went.
Yeah.
You got to take a dump. You go find a wag bag. You open it up, put it around the little toilet seat, do your business, fold it all in together, walk it over to the burn pit. Like, we're talking very primitive living.
Right.
Not quite sure where I was going with that. Oh, yeah. So we show up, 3rd Battalion, 7th Marines is there. They're getting ready to do a turnover with 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines. Now, during the time 3-7 was there, they were taking contact, obviously, but there wasn't a whole lot of like active missions happening from Nole. The Brits were still there, 3-7 was there, and it was just kind of more of maintaining a presence, right? So 3-5 shows up, and word goes out that 3-5 means business. They're showing up to like kick ass and take names, basically. They're here to take the fight to the enemy. They're here to do a push. They're here to offensively get these folks out of here. And so we're like, okay, yeah, that sounds good. And within 3 or 4 days of 3-5 showing up to Nole, turning over with 3-7, we're already experiencing casualties, right? And as a kid at the time, that first casualty like didn't really register, right? It almost wasn't real. You're playing a video game and your character dies. You're like, oh well, he's gonna respawn.
Right.
It wasn't like that, but it also wasn't like, somebody just died, right? It was just like, hey, someone died. The whole compound's in River City. No outgoing calls. Until we can notify their family. It's like, okay. And then the tempo only picked up from there. And then by the time 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines left Sangin, they had 25 killed in action and over 100, combat ineffective, right? Whether these are single, double, triple amputees coming out of Sangin. It was nonstop. And so a deployment like that, for a first deployment, young in the fleet, young in life, seeing these things happen, experiencing this, like I said, in retrospect, to have been serving a mission for a church, a couple years ago, it was a lot to handle. And I I didn't process that at the time, right? 22 years old, watching all these guys die around me, and I've told this to my wife a couple times, but there just came this day, there was this moment where you accept your mortality, right? Because the Marine Corps breeds this into you that you're this invincible fighting war machine, and they do an incredible job of it, right? Like, you show up to Afghanistan like ready to go. Nothing's going to hurt you. But then in reality, when you see actual war happening and actual people dying, it has this effect on you where you're like, okay, people are dying. That might be me. I might die here, right? And I remember that day. I remember exactly where I was standing. We had this little maintenance area set up. There was a generator I was working on. They needed fuel replacements all the time. fuel pumps and main blocks and all this crap. And I was standing there just kind of looking off, and boom, massive IED. And this is several months into our deployment, and that was not an uncommon thing to happen. You'd be woken up in the middle of the night, there'd be these massive IEDs that are like rattling the compound, or you'd be walking around and it'd scare the crap out of you. And I remember just standing there listening, IED went off, and just like having that realization, like, there's a chance that I'm not going home from this. Right. And then what does that do? I don't know. I don't know if I ever like fully processed that like realization.
Right.
Excuse me. Until many years later. But, I certainly remember it. So not to get like, down in the dumps or anything. It was a hard deployment. Lost good folks. Saw things as a 20-year-old, 22-year-old kid that like, I don't know if I've ever really fully digested them. One of the craziest experiences I had on that deployment was I was at the AgDag. It was kind of the middle of the day. It had been a fairly quiet day. And there was one big generator that ran the AgDag. It ran, our power for our maintenance shop, and it ran the equipment at the little field hospital that we had. The hospital was a tent with a cot in it.
And the AgDag is a group, like where the headquarters has.
So that's the COC. The AgDag is like the flight line crew.
Gotcha.
They're managing, helos coming in and going out, just kind of making sure that birds are clear. And we're standing there, and I can't remember why I was at the medical tent, some kind of conversation or looking at a piece of their gear or something. And out of, my periphery, we see this like Ford Ranger driving really fast towards us. Now, I wasn't super scared about that because they had already passed the checkpoint. Like they were on the fob, so that we knew that they should be there. But they're driving pretty fast, and they swing around, and they put the vehicle in park. And it's a little green truck with a 50 cal mounted on the roof, or a 240, whatever it was. And they put the vehicle in park, and you just kind of see these like little things dripping from the bed. And at the time, I had no idea what it was. I was like, what the freak is this? So these two guys get out, the MARSOC guys. They get out, they come around, they drop the tailgate, and there's a guy in the bed of that pickup truck. And so what had been dripping out was obviously blood. This guy had taken a 50 cal round to the stomach. He was, Taliban. He was out in the field digging. He had comm unit on him. He was planting stuff out in the field where the, in between Nole and Fob Robinson, which is where the MARSOC guys were. So he meant to do harm, right? He had ill intent, and they saw him, and they got the all clear to light him up, and they did. Homeboy took a 50 cal round, and he wasn't doing well, right? Mm-hmm. He didn't die, and so our code of conduct is, okay, well, he's not dead, so we need to render medical aid. So they threw him in the pickup truck, brought him over, and I'm just standing there, and everything's just happening around me, right?
Right.
And so they bring this guy in, they throw him on a stretcher. I get roped in. I have a corner of the stretcher. We take him into the hospital, put him on this makeshift hospital bed. The doc is there hooking him up to all these different, monitoring systems and trying to do whatever you would do for somebody that took a round in the gut. And they had him hooked up to what are those things called? Not an EKG, but it's like monitoring heartbeats, right?
I think that is a EKG, ain't it?
Okay. And so, you just kind of see it going off in the corner, and then all of a sudden it just it stops, right? And I'm watching this guy, and I'm in retrospect, I realize I'm watching this guy die, right? His thing flatlines, he stops breathing, and he's just laying there, and then everybody's like, it was just a very surreal moment, right? Like if you've experienced death, I think it's one thing. If you've, maybe been around a family member, or you've seen somebody pass, even tragically, maybe it was a car accident, it certainly leaves an impact. Mm-hmm. But to be watching this guy die on a table in the middle of nowhere, just it really had this impact on me, and what the impact was, I'm not quite sure. It made me think a lot about what we were doing there. It made me think a lot about, well, it gave me deep thoughts, right? Some of them I'm not going to share here, but it certainly caused a lot of reflection and retrospect. And that's one example that through the years it stuck with me. Like, that's something that you see, and like it or not, like, that doesn't go away, right? That's not like something you forget. Like, oh, I forgot my friend's phone number, or I forgot like where my buddy lived. Like, those are things that you watch happen, that you watch happen over and over again for the rest of your life, basically. So, not a pity party. Not here to like. I'm not sharing that story because I want like.
No, yeah, I don't get that. You're just talking as a matter of factly, and again, like I said prior to this, like, this is whatever it needs to be.
Yeah.
There's no like agenda. There's no whatever, and you share what you want to share. I don't edit anything out. I mean, unless somebody requests it or what have you.
Yeah.
But it's whatever it needs to be, and that's like I said before. It's really like the similarities and the commonalities and stories. Like, we're all human at the end of the day, and it's like, just because we're in the military, I don't know if there's like this unrealistic expectation that we're not supposed to feel, or
Sure.
what have you. Even somebody that was there to kill you, like, to try to cause harm,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because I played these mental exercises in my head. Like, what would I do if somebody invaded my country, right?
Yeah.
For whatever reason. Let's say I'm just a farmer, and like all of a sudden they're taking over my house or what have you, or taking my property or my crops or what have you. And I'd probably defend in the same way. Now it's unrealistic. How can we see, or you see this and then not have any thoughts questioning that? Because you that would take the human aspect out of you. That's what a robots are. Robots are. You
Mm-hmm.
know what I mean? Like, where they don't have that that connection, that human, understanding that what it is to die.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's not about a pity party. It's not about any of that. It's your story, man. I mean, at the end of the day, it's your story, and people are going to take it how they take it, and it doesn't matter. Like, this is not about like always having fun and good times. It's whatever it needs to be. So if you want to share that and keep going with that, at the end of the day, dude, like, it's what it needs to be.
Yeah.
It's like if you go to my Instagram page for this channel, it's everything everywhere all at once. It's mental health. It's veterans. It's, existential conversations. It's finding that connection between all of us and finding the common path. I think nowadays it's too simple and it's lazy to just think that people are just the differences, and we just can disagree and fight over it and just be like, well, just have my arms crossed like a little fucking kid, and just not consider any other alternatives, any other understandings, to look across the line and see humans. And every war that's happened, theirs has been that. Even the Ukraine war, like, where the Russian people, there was reports of them leaving because they didn't want to kill some of their countrymen, because that Ukraine needs to be part of Russia at one point in time.
Mm-hmm.
The same culture, pretty much, and if there's any hesitation about that or anything, my point is to you, like, you feel what you feel. Nobody can tell you how you should feel.
Yeah.
Like, that's for you, and you share what you want to share, and if you don't want to share it, then we don't have to. We can go somewhere else with it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's like the conversation we had before, like the damn, I can't speak tonight. All right. People minimizing their stories because they always feel like somebody else had it worse, and people not wanting to share the stories because there is, whether people want to talk about it or not, and I've seen it, there are veterans out there like, you shouldn't have that because I had it fucking worse than you, you know, and that's one part of the healing process, right? I mean, they're just, whether you stay stuck in that place, I mean, it's up to each individual. And I've seen it where people have had it really bad, but they won't say anything because they don't want to one, they don't want to bring somebody down or put their problems on them. Because at the end of the day, what were we taught in the military? Like,
yeah, mission first. Right?
Mission first, take care of others before yourself. You're always last, and maybe that's why a lot of good people kind of join the military and they keep that, and then it just reinforces those ideas, and we just bottle it in, and then we self implode. That's what I did. You know, I didn't want to share anything. I didn't want to talk about anything. Fucking drank, and it led me nowhere good. And that was this idea of like, how dare you speak of your story, because these like hundreds and thousands of other guys had it worse than you. You know, you're Air Force. You know what I mean? Like, a lot of times, I get it. Like, why people on our bases and they're like, "What the fuck, man? You guys got fucking, you know, chow hall 24/7. Got flight. You know, everything we had was really nice. I had no part in that, but I would get bitched out just the same. You know,
sure.
And at the time, I was like, "What the fuck? What did I do? You know, I didn't choose to come on this deployment. That this is where I got selected to go. You know,
yeah."
But, you know, even that, like, I don't, and that's one of the common things I've seen through the Dirt Therapy Project, the program, is this common thing that there's a lot of people that serve, but there's a lot of people that don't want to talk about it because they feel like, they assume for whatever reason, like me personally, like that, like, oh, you served during wartime, I served during peacetime. I'm like, but did you have a choice in that? Did you have a choice, like, when the war was going to be?
Yeah.
You
still volunteered, right?
Exactly. And you should be proud of that service. I'm not saying, like, you know, I mean, if you want to boast about it, it's your world, you can do it. But there's a lot of people that do that. And there's a lot of people that don't even want to. Some of them don't want to ride with us, you know, because of that notion. They're like, no, like, you know, I don't want to, you know, I don't want to take a spot. And that's another thing I've heard. Even people that did see wartime or did deploy or did do 20 years or whatever, they minimize their story, or they don't want to. I got into this conversation with my brother-in-law earlier. He gave me a haircut, Marine. This idea that, and going back to taking care of others before yourself, is and I was the same way. Like, no, I don't want to take a spot. Yeah, I don't want to take a spot. Like, that's for somebody else. Somebody else had it worse. And I've told you this before, I feel guilty a lot of times going on these trips. You know, I feel blessed. But at the same time, like, no, like, I don't want to take a spot. Like, that's why me and Sandy always tell you, like, hey, man, there's somebody else. Let them have our spot, you know. But there's this idea, like, that we need to minimize our footprint, our story, or whatever, because we feel like we're going to take from someone else. But but just doing that itself, and I'm not saying everyone should share the story if they're comfortable and they're in a place to do so and are willing to take criticism in whatever way, because that's the world we live in nowadays. But if they're willing to do that, that would help so many other people, because they would start to open up about themselves and be like, oh, man, you had it the same way. Or, damn, you know, I thought I had it bad, and I appreciate I appreciate other branches more now, because I understood that, like, Army, Marines, for the most part, most Air Force didn't experience that, right? I mean, unless you're like, you know, TAC Ps or Special Forces or what have you, or Combat or whoever. But with those, like, I could understand it to a certain extent, but then to hear it and to appreciate it even more, like to hear the nuance, like the ground conditions, because I served in joint environments, but we never talked about that stuff. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to, like, clearances, and that's a whole different part of it. Like, you don't want to talk about anything, you don't want to show anything, because you're afraid to lose your clearance, you're afraid that you're not going to get an assignment somewhere or something. There's all these different things that factor into that. But hopefully everything I'm saying is making sense, and hopefully you're not raining on the parade or anything.
Yeah.
And that's why I don't keep a script.
Sure.
This is whatever it needs to be.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I'm picking up what you're laying down.
Yeah, I feel like I just said a lot of nothing.
No,
but
it's good, man.
Yeah, but yeah, man. I mean, and that's part of it, right? It's connection. that's what most people, this understanding that they feel that they're connected in this virtual space, but they're more disconnected than ever because we're not designed in that manner.
Yeah.
I mean, until their reality accepts that reality of being virtual, or like we can get into Neuralink or all these different other technologies that could make that more realistic. Like, until then, there's going to be a huge gap in connection because we have put this virtual synthetic, network when we're already, in my opinion, like we're already connected. We just don't see it because we're so fucking distracted with everything.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
So, yeah, I mean, yeah.
It's good, man. Yeah, I mean, I get where you're going with that. And I wasn't like, neither here nor there. And that's just kind of one story I have from that deployment of many. And I get home from Afghanistan and I just kind of expected life to, well, I don't know what I expected life to be. But before I had deployed, my wife had made me promise. She's like, just promise me now, when you get home, you'll go talk to a therapist. Right? Like, neither of us had any idea what was going to happen over there, what was going to be seen, what the conditions were going to be like. She's like, just do it. Just, for me, just go do it. I was like, okay, yeah, whatever. So I get home, and she's like, okay, you need to go talk to somebody. I was like, oh boy, okay. And so I go to this guy on base, the base psychiatrist, and I walk in, and he's like, oh, I want to try exposure therapy with you. I was like, okay. He's like, what I need you to do is go home and write down, X number of memories that you feel are like traumatic memories, and I want you to bring them back, and we're going to talk about them in depth. I was like, okay. So I go home and I spend a lot of time just kind of writing down. I think I had like 10 major like sticking points that were on my list of things to talk about. Long story short, with the exposure therapy, all that really happened is I wrote down a bunch of stuff that happened, talked about it in extreme detail with somebody, and then it just kind of like cemented those experiences for me. And this guy, I felt like, was such a quack that I just didn't go back, right? So it was like exposure therapy done wrong.
Right.
Which is whatever, it was what it was. And I also get home, I'm going to shift gears a little bit just because
Yeah, I got you.
I don't want this to be taken the wrong way, or I know you've already said it's okay to talk about whatever, but
Yeah.
I'm not a victim here, is what my point is. So, long story short, I got home and life resumed as normal, I guess. There were a lot of things that I hadn't figured out how to process yet. And honestly, the process of those things wouldn't happen for several more years, right? Like, I didn't actually start healing or processing from this deployment until after I had separated from the Marine Corps. So we get home, check back into our unit. All of 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines is on a mandatory 90-day suicide watch. Nobody's taking leave. Nobody's doing anything. It was this, this very impactful deployment. I check out. I go back to my unit, and they kind of knew what we had been doing over there. They kind of knew what was going on, but nobody really seemed to care that much. Not that I wanted like the hurrah or anything, but they didn't get it, right? They weren't there. So I check in. Life goes back to normal. And at this time, I had, year and a half left on my contract, and I had a conversation with the leader very shortly after returning home. That day, I decided, okay, I'm getting out of the Marine Corps. Had you asked me a week before that, I would have said I was going to do 20. Had you asked me the entire time I had been in, I was going to be in for 20. Had a conversation with this guy, and on that day, I was like, yep, I'm getting out as soon as I can. So with my wife's encouragement, I started going to school in the evenings, got my associate's degree, something I was super excited about. She came from a very educated family. That wasn't huge in my family. And so it felt good to felt good to do that and have that. And then the time came to leave the Marine Corps. And so we did. And it was, it came down to deciding, okay, do we want to stay in San Diego, right? Go to school in San Diego. I was going to get out and do my undergrad. Stay in San Diego, go home to Utah, or try something new and come to Texas. Now, my dad and stepmom had come here in 2004. This was her last duty station. She had since retired. But they had been here, like, hey, let's just go try something new, right? Let's pick door number 3. We know what San Diego's all about. We also know that we can't afford to live here when I'm out of the Marine Corps and I'm not getting a housing allowance, right? Like, that's not going to work out. We could go home to Salt Lake, but like we did that and we know what that's all about. So let's go try something new. So we came here in 2013, started going to UTSA. Once again, I separated from active duty in May, and in June I was in class in summer semester. And again, man, that was transition by, sledgehammer to the face, right? You're in college, I won't go down that rabbit hole. It was like, it was crazy. I found myself wanting to like stand up and yell at these people who are walking into class 15 minutes late. Right? I'm like, what are you guys doing? Right?
Right.
Like, here I am. Anyway, finish my undergrad, start working. A couple different jobs. It was really hard to find work immediately. And I took a job at Rudy's in the interim. I was in, one of an exciting period of time, and ended up getting a job with USAA in their contact center. So, super grateful for that. I worked there in the contact center for about a year and a half. At that time, I had also applied to grad school, and I also, which gets to the main story here, is I had also just randomly jumped on Craigslist and bought a mountain bike. Now, this is the first bike that I had owned in about 8 or 10 years. The last bike I had, I sold when I got back from Afghanistan. I sold it to buy tires for my truck. I got kind of into like the off-roading scene or the overlanding scene. Had a Land Cruiser, super fun. Wasn't into biking. And just on a whim, bought a 2004 Kona Coil Air Deluxe. Drove up to San Marcos, met the guy at the outlets, brought it home, and started riding. I'd leave work in the afternoon at my regular, quitting time, and then in the evening I had classes at UTSA for grad school, and so I had about a period of like 3 hours between work and class, and it didn't make sense to go home and turn around because I'd be in traffic the entire time. So I went over to Leon Creek and I jumped on my bike and I started riding. And I'll tell you what, man, ride number 1, I absolutely fell right back in love with it. Just obsessed with it. Like I shared earlier, I had grown up biking. It was something I did a lot and absolutely loved. And to have that opportunity again, I just kind of picked up right where I left off, fell right back in love with the sport, and I was hooked again. And as you know, the perfect number of bikes is N+1, right? So what did I do? Within a few months, I had bought another bike. So then I have 2 bikes. I have one that I can start loaning out, and that's what I did. I'd invite people that were in my program at UTSA. I'd invite coworkers. There was this guy on my team at work. He had just retired from the Marine Corps. He did 23 years, lieutenant colonel. We became obviously buddies, right? Like we're Marines. And in the mornings before work, we'd go run together. We'd run on Leon Creek, and then I got this bike, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I have a mountain bike." And so, okay, awesome. Let's go bike riding. Mm-hmm. And so we did, and we rode bikes all the time. And I noticed this impact that bike riding had on my life. And it just became this like ultimate pressure release valve, right? Like, when you're using your pressure cooker and you can't unscrew the lid because it's going to explode. Like, that's kind of what my life felt like. I felt like if somebody like twisted my lid wrong, said the wrong thing, did the wrong thing, something happened, I'd be like, explode. And mountain biking became this thing where I could open that little latch on the pressure cooker and let all the pressure out, and then you could safely open it. Mm-hmm. And that's what biking was for me. And it just became incredible. So lots and lots and lots of conversations were had with this guy named Bill on the trail. And eventually I was like, hey, this has really impacted my life. I think this could be something. I think this could be an outlet for other vets. I think other people could like this. And I tell you what, man, he gave me a lot of effective challenge, right? Like there was quite a bit of, I wouldn't say pushback. What I would say is there was a lot of critical response, if that's the right terminology. I'm not sure. Like I'd say something, oh, this is my idea, and Bill would say, okay, but what about this? And so I'd have to make a micro adjustment and say, okay, well, what if we do it like this? He's like, yeah, it's a good idea. So Cliff Note version of that, that's how the Dirt Therapy project started, right? Like I didn't sit down one day and decide I'm going to start a nonprofit. What kind of nonprofit should I start? I didn't search up a database of active nonprofits and decide, okay, there's a shortage of mountain biking space. Let's do that, right? Like it just kind of happened naturally. It evolved on its own, right here on the trails in San Antonio. That's where the Dirt Therapy Project was born, on Leon Creek, basically. And here we are, almost 5 years later, and the program has absolutely gone through several transformations. And what we have today is what exists today never, ever in my wildest dreams existed when I filed that paperwork to incorporate and then to get a 501c3 designation. I never in my wildest dreams thought that we'd be where we are today. When we started, I was like, okay, here we are. We're in Texas. There's a group of vets that we can ride with. Our group rides for the first year consisted of 4 people, me being one of them. And that's just kind of how it went. And you fast forward to today where we're in 9 states, 8 active chapters, thousands of miles ridden on a monthly basis between all those chapters. If I had the opportunity and the time and the capacity, we could be in almost every state by the end of the month, right? It's just,
right.
It's kind of limited by what I can keep my arms around. But anyway, looking at where we started and where we are today, it's this crazy evolution. And at this point, I almost feel like I'm along for the ride, right? Like, yeah, there's certainly things that I do and people that I lean on, and you and Sandy are obviously fundamental and paramount to this program, being able to lean on you and talk to you and get your insight. But now it's just growing under its own momentum almost.
Yeah. Like I said earlier, like every event that we attend or we go to or we drive up, it's bananas. Like how, the first I heard of it, and I didn't even know of it, I just got invited to Bentonville, and then to hear the other side of that story, just saying the funding and or lack thereof, more accurately describing that, and I didn't even know until we had that conversation at that cafe at having a coffee that morning that you were starting a nonprofit. You know? At the time, I was so kind of like you. I bought a mountain bike on an impulse buy. I mountain biked a few times in Germany. One of my supervisors invited me, and I went. Most of the times I was hungover, but I felt great after. Yeah. I didn't do it again until I retired. That was 13 years later or so, approximately around there. And then I came across in that kind of that frenzy of buying parts, and because I didn't think I would ever find something again that would give me that joy that I had. The only thing I could remember that brought that same was when I played team sports, in high school or middle school, where I felt I had this I don't know, it was definitely way off, but I was like, damn, maybe I could go to the NFL or whatever. But it's just my ego or whatever. But with that is, I didn't have that same drive where I wanted to go and I wanted to go, to practice and all these things, even through all the military. I enjoyed a lot of the things I did, but it wasn't the same thing. I just didn't have that passion into it, and for various reasons, I'm sure. But with that, getting out of the military and then just buying that bike on a whim, not telling Sandy, not that I had to ask her. I go out for my first ride, I dropped in right by mainland, and it was so loose, here in Texas, so loose. I pushed and I just fell, and I remember laughing, But that was post, post inpatient, post many different counselors, many different, like I was on psych meds at the time. Just a whole different series, like 6 years of just like fogginess and not knowing what's going to happen, wanting to, and I'm not trying to make it about me right now, and I don't see myself as a victim either, but like being in this place where I didn't want to get out of bed in the morning, I didn't want to, I didn't give a shit, honestly. I just didn't care. I felt like everyone was like, going to be okay. I didn't want to bring my stuff to anyone else, I just wanted to. I felt like I was like I don't want to say a cancer, but I just felt like anybody I'm with, I just try to push away. Mm-hmm. And then to go through all that, my shit, go through all these different therapies, different programs, every psych med you go to or doc you go to, they give you their own cocktail of what they think that will work for you. Like, I don't like that one, so I'm going to put you on this. Not understanding, like, because I had this, you're putting the trust in somebody, right? And I'm not saying that they had ill intentions, but me not understanding, like, just fix me, just give me whatever, fix me. And I wasn't really buying in, or not want to say I'm buying into, but I wasn't doing the work at the time, I was still doing the mission, doing a lot of other stuff. Fast forward through all that stuff, and then I get out of the military, not sure what I'm going to do. I know I stopped drinking at the time. I was like, I need to put this aside. I need to figure out what the fuck's going on. I bought that mountain bike, and I went out for my first ride. And to have that joy, that elation, I didn't expect it. I was just literally like throwing fucking darts at a dartboard in the dark,
Yeah.
I was just hoping to hit something.
Yeah.
And that was one of them, I mean, we go down art therapy, video editing, all these different things I've learned to, and that came through other stuff. But mountain biking, going back to that, I'm going down all these damn tangents. But with mountain biking itself, it just kind of was like a huge, like a hand that pulled me out of, like started to pull me out, or I started to pull myself out of like this darkness, right? And then I started getting plugged back in with the community, right?
Yeah.
Jesse Salas was a big part of that. And that's how I met sport, I just went riding. They invited me to go riding. Jesse did. And I went riding with them. And I started to, as much as I tried to get away from the military because I didn't want anything to do with that,
yeah.
I just kept finding more veterans. And I was like, well, again, going back to it, like, I just like, maybe this is what I don't know, just let it go. Let's just ride bikes or whatever. Sell some tires, at a Walgreens parking lot. It was like at 10 o'clock at night. Sport hits me up. It's like, hey, man, you still got those tires? And I'm like, yeah, So I told Sandy, I'll be back in 10 minutes. I was like, yeah, it should be like a 10-minute thing. So I take off, sell the tires, and then we ended up talking for like 3 or 4 hours in the parking lot. She's calling me. The cars, because I don't like to answer my phone when people are talking to me.
Yeah.
And luckily, we've gone through like our own stuff, so she understood like it's probably something crazy, like if it's Simon or whatever. So, and then a week later, he calls me up like, "Hey, my friend Jonathan is gonna take a trip to Bentonville. Do you want to go?" I was like, "Where the fuck's Bentonville?" And then I go, and not knowing, but at the time I had all this fire. That's what I'm trying to get with it. Like, man, like I'm so excited, right? I just got this hardtail and doing this stuff, and I think at the time I was already riding for like 5 or 6 months, maybe less. I had just bought that Diamondback, and so that's what I go with out there, and that's where I get my nickname from you. And but yeah, it was at that cafe where I had drinking a coffee or whatever, and I was like, man, I was so excited. I was telling you about. I was like, man, I want to start a nonprofit or something, but I know I didn't want to. And you're like, that's what I'm gonna do. I was like, dude, I'll do whatever I can to boost your signal. And and fast forward, everything we go to, whether Angel Fire, whether it's Big Bend, whatever, like it's just like, this is crazy. Like I get to do this, and I feel guilty because like we're riding bikes, you know what I mean? And I don't know, I just never feel like I do enough. I've told you this before many times. So that's what.
Yeah, I mean it's a small world, right? And not to oversimplify things, but, to your point, we're just riding bikes. Yeah, we are just riding bikes. But if you think about what we're doing, it's almost the perfect combination of ingredients, especially for veterans, right? You're doing something active and physical, you're pushing yourself, you're outside, we can ride rain or shine. You're outside, you're getting fresh air, you're getting vitamin D, you have the camaraderie, you have this tribe that you belong with that have similar experiences, similar backgrounds. Obviously, we're all our own individuals, but you have people that understand you, just like you did in the Air Force, just like I did in the Marine Corps. Shared experiences build those bonds. And so the Dirt Therapy Project has become this, this tool by which veterans get to find their tribe again. Now, I'm not naive enough to say that mountain biking is the perfect answer for every single veteran. Obviously, I know that's not the case.
Right.
Whether it be physical limitations, whether it be whatever, right? Like mountain biking isn't a one-size-fits-all application. What I love about being able to grow the awareness of the program is to start building that family, right? Like, hey, you're a vet and you like mountain biking? Awesome. You're now part of our tribe. Or you're a vet and you think you would like mountain biking? You want to try it out? Awesome. Come use one of our loaner bikes. You love it? Sweet. Let's find a way to get you a bike, right?
Right.
And so all that to say, it's not one size fits all, but sometimes the easy things are the simple things.
Yeah. No, exactly. And yeah, there is a lot of positives to it. And I think that's kind of circling back to the minimalization, right? It's just like, man, we're just doing this. But yeah, there is so many positives to it. I've seen some of I remember when I was trying to talk Sandy into it because she was very standoffish, and she's grown. You've seen her grow within the program as well. I've seen a lot of people, and that's one of the things I love about going on these like retreats or even local rides, how people start to come out of their shell over time.
Yeah.
And another thing I love about it is like it's I tell people when they ask what is it like, what's it about, it's like it's therapy without therapy. I know therapy isn't the word, but we're just being us.
Sure.
We're just hanging out, and if people want to learn about resources, we talk about that. Some people want to ask a question about something we've gone through, we talk about that. Not every night obligated to, but it's beautiful how things just organically just work themselves out, and we share the common struggle on the way up. Like Lost Lake, that was a hell of a climb.
Yeah,
but it was beautiful, and we got to see all these things. We got to help people, climb up or give them pointers on the way up. Got to jump in this cold water at the top. Taking this, I still look at like pictures and video of it. I'm like, that looks fake.
Yeah,
it doesn't look real. And then on the way down, everyone's hooting and hollering, everyone high fiving at the end.
Yep.
And it's just we're riding this natural high, which is it's amazing, man. And on top of that, like I would try to tell Sandy to get into it. Like one thing I love about mountain biking is that it takes you places where a car can't.
Sure.
And you have to work for it.
Yep.
It's not, you can't just drive and just like, oh, when are we there yet? No, you're having to work to get there. So it's not like a free trip. You got to pay something,
Yep.
whether it's a little bit of blood or it's, sweat or what have you. And we're always sharing this common, ride up together and just BSing or whatever, or laughing at each other. And yeah. It's pretty amazing, the program. And I remember a couple of conversations we had over like text messaging and stuff, and like where I was thinking about where, like, before coming a part of the program, like where I would like to see it, go, and it's quickly becoming that, and it's pretty bananas to see, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of unreal to think back, like I said, year one, we had 2 or 3 folks at a group ride. And then this year for Memorial Day, we probably had, 80 folks at Flat Rock and a helicopter that showed up and then gave rides to everybody that came out. So not only the program growth, but like the sponsors, right? Celicopter coming into our program and sponsoring our program has been massive. Like, I've never been a part of a veteran nonprofit activity where I got a ride on a helicopter and,
right.
To fly around, or, they paid the bill for our trip to Angel Fire last year, and I mean that's such an incredible opportunity.
It is,
and it's just I don't know. I think it's awesome.
Yeah, and it's also awesome to see like it's not doing like just being the people that we. That's gonna sound like I'm coming off like I'm bragging, but just trying to do right by people, right? You end up attracting other people that are doing right by others.
Yeah.
And then it's a community that I never thought I would be a part of because I was always so introverted in the sense. Like once you get to me talking, I'll talk to just about anybody.
Sure.
But to get me there, it takes a lot. But to kind of start getting plugged into all these different communities and just seeing these people doing this amazing work, and like in their own right, like you said, there's not one size fits all. It's for like mountain biking, but there's even just from Label Risk. There's Kobe and Uncana doing good things, even though with the company. There's David and Christian from Uncana. I mean not Uncana. Terra Arma. Those are good dudes. Took me to the hospital when I crashed at Spider. He didn't have to do that. He could have just been like, you know what, too late, take an Uber or whatever.
Yeah.
But he hung out with me in there. Not that I needed him to hold my hand or nothing, but he was there. He drove me. I invited him back to those just so I could have some, something to laugh at.
Yeah.
We had a good conversation on the way over and the way back, and yeah, it's pretty fascinating to see this snowball of just good things just rolling and picking up people along the way.
Yeah.
And just kind of seeing them blossom within the program or within themselves or within their families. It's this positive force that it's amazing to see if you kind of just every once in a while step back and just appreciate, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Third Therapy Project. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a good time.
Yeah, it's a good time. But so what do you see going in the future? Like what, like are you just trying to enjoy the ride right now, or like what
yeah, that's a super fair question, and maybe because there's ambiguity around that question, it hasn't happened yet. So obviously in a dream situation or a dream scenario, this would be what I could do full time, right? Like currently I'm managing this on top of a career in a professional industry, on top of family life and all those things. But like, if I could find a way to do this full time, that would be a dream come true, I think, and having conversations with my wife, I'm like, okay, is that the dream? Because if that were the case, and if this were my full-time job, I imagine it would mean a lot of time on the road, right? Going different places, having more retreats. And is that the most conducive thing to family life with young family, right? And I don't know if it is. And so I guess my answer to that question is this. I'm not entirely sure what the future of the program looks like. Obviously, it's been a heck of a ride, and obviously, we'll keep doing what we're doing for as long as we can. It does feel a little bit like the candle is burning at both ends. And I don't know how long that's sustainable for me personally, professionally, and for my family. Because there's only so much to give.
Right.
Now, I guess I say all that to say, I don't know the answer to your question. I don't know what this program will be like in the future. I don't know the size of this program in the future. I do know that it's absolutely, one of the funnest things I do. Aside from my wife and my kids, like this is what I love the most. And I wouldn't trade it for anything. So we're just going to keep on keeping on for as long as we can,
Yeah, it's just, I think it's going to come. like just the way that it naturally worked itself out, that the next evolution will present itself. If I feel like you just keep plugging along and just keep circling, around the right people.
Yeah.
It's oftentimes when we do not force things is when it actually happens the way it's supposed to. If we're always trying to go after for something, for an idea of we think what it might be the wrong reason. But if we just naturally be ourselves and continue to push through and be the change, if you will, it'll work out in the way it's supposed to. With that, I mean, it's also, I mean, I think you've been doing that too. It's like growing the base is one part of it, and trying to delegate some of the responsibility, because as it does grow, we got to continue to find those people that are kind of embodying that it factor, that kind of just presents itself through whether the retreats or just through the course of knowing people.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and that's a very fair point. It has gotten to the point where there's no way that I can do every single thing that needs to be done, which is okay. And learning how to hand off things and how to delegate things has been huge. And like I said earlier, having you, I would consider you the right hand guy, right? Like you're it. You and Sandy, you're as much of the backbone of this program as I am. And so having you guys involved is massive. And that's why I often have those conversations with you, like, hey, if I'm asking too much and you're facing a burnout or a potential of something negative happening because I'm asking you, you have to tell me.
Right.
Because having that happen is like my biggest fear, right? I would never want to put you guys in a situation where I overburden you and this becomes not fun anymore.
Right.
It always has to be fun. It can be busy, but it always has to be fun.
Yeah. And I think that's what you keep me balanced in that. Like, when you're like, certain things I take to myself too seriously. Like I have this idea, like with the race team, right? I envision like I don't want to say we need to, but I would like to have the right people kind of represent the program. And maybe that's from the military aspect of it, like the whole person concept. But on top of that, I'm like, sometimes I look at how you handle situations. I'm like, man, maybe I'm taking myself too serious. I need to fucking start smiling more or whatever. But that's part of it, right? It's just like keeping each other in, I don't want to say in check, but just in balance. And but the race team is another aspect of it that, I get that and I understand that, like the traveling and all that stuff, because that's what I did a lot of the military. I was gone a lot. Yeah. Me and Sandy's marriage, I was gone like, I'd say like half of it or more. And that was but so it was cool when she started writing and she started going and then that was on its own, like her own evolution of herself, and she continues to grow within herself in the program. And it's pretty awesome to see her, because she's also an introvert, more so than me.
Not Sandy.
Yeah, she can be sharp with her words, but I mean, it's all love. I mean, it's just
heart of gold.
I don't know where to go from here with this. Is there anything you wanted to highlight, or any future endeavors? Oh, like to let people know about signing up through TDTP.org for the retreats.
Yep. Yeah. So one of the things that's been on my radar for a few years is building out a formal application to our events. And that is available now. So in the spring of 23, in May of 2023, we're going to Bentonville again. Airbnb is already booked and paid for, and it's going to be beautiful. We're going to do Eureka Springs again. We're going to do the shuttles. We're going to do a couple days of riding. And so if you have an interest in going, go sign up. TDTP.org/apply. I made that as easy as I could, and you'll just click on the blue button in the middle of the screen. It'll take you to a Google Doc, answer all those questions. And I'm my goal is to have everybody selected no later than the 1st of February, so that you have a couple months, to prepare for that. It's the first time we've gone through the formal application process, so there might be a couple bumps and hiccups along the way. I ask for your grace if that's the case, but we'll figure it out.
You rhyming on here?
Yeah, that's my other thing that I do. Poet and didn't even realize it.
Yeah.
So that's happening right now. What else? 2023 is shaping up to be a super fun year. We have a booth at the Sedona Mountain Bike Festival next year, so that's going to be radical. They're anticipating over 5,000 attendees over the 3 days. So we'll take some swag out there and some merch and see if we can raise some funds for the program. We got Bentonville in the spring. We're going to do Colorado again next summer. We'll do Angel Fire in the fall. And it's shaping up to be a super good year.
Yeah, I'm excited for it. Definitely Sedona. I haven't never been to Sedona.
Yeah, neither
have I.
think
I have. But so if TDTP.org, or you could also, if you're interested in TDTP or checking out one of the chapters with the 9 states that we're in, is Colorado, Utah,
Arizona,
North
Washington.
Carolina, Washington State,
Oregon, California, Arkansas.
I feel like we're missing one.
Arizona. Did you say Arizona?
We said Arizona. Utah.
Texas.
We're our own damn state. Yeah. So let us know. I know of people have kind of reached out to me. I usually direct them to the website. Also, if you want to check out any of the retreats, the Dirt Therapy Project has a YouTube channel. The videos are uploaded there, and those are kind of made to kind of show the experience through music. Sometimes it can't always use just the sound because the audio quality is not there yet.
Yeah.
Working on that. But once we get that dialed, you'll hear the crisp sounds of the ASMR of riding a bike through wherever. But I use music in the meantime to kind of, highlight the trip. And David Epic at Epic MTB SATX. He has been coming along, helping us with the videography portion of it. So our video portions of the trips are starting to evolve a little bit. So hopefully you guys see that. So yeah, go to the Dirt Therapy Project on YouTube. You can also follow on Instagram. Is it the Dirt Therapy Project or
Instagram is just at Dirt Therapy Project?
Okay, at Dirt Therapy Project. You could also follow the race team. We have a race team, TDTP Racing. We have some guys hitting the podium here, kicking ass pretty good. We also have Brittany Van Fleet that won the Nationals at Cat 1 Downhill Nationals in Winter Park, Colorado.
Yeah, she killed it.
Yeah, she killed it. So, yeah, stay tuned for more information. Hopefully I get Jonathan on again. We'll talk about some other crazy stuff. Yeah, appreciate it. Do you have anything else you want to talk about or anything?
No, that's good, man. I appreciate the time. Thanks for your patience. I know we've been talking about this for a couple of years, but it was good to come have a chat with you. Thanks for letting me kind of get some things off my chest.
Yeah, man, anytime.
You can send me your bill.
It's like I said, it's what it needs to be, man. And I really enjoy doing it. I'm really glad to have you on. And I don't ever force anybody. Like I've asked of quite a few people. Some people have real busy schedules, but I really try not to force things. We've had these conversations before. It'll work out when it's supposed to.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's hard to do that. Not necessarily with the podcast, but other things in life. But the more I do that, the more it's like it makes sense why it happened when it did. So yeah, man, I appreciate you.
Thanks, dude.
All right, man.
Much love.
Much love, man. All right, out.
Howdy. Yeah, buddy.
If there's anything that you want to, I don't know, if you want to take out or whatever, let me know.
That's all good. That's fun.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for driving through the traffic.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I was about to call you and that's one of the things I'm trying to work on is allow people to make their own decisions.
Yeah.
I try to consider too much of what people are going through, and I wanted to call like, hey, you just go home. We'll do this time. But I was like, no, he's a big man.
Yeah.
You let me know.
I mean, it's hard. You give people a way out, and they're often going to take it.
Yeah, it's true. I do that too. I
Yeah.
give myself a way out sometimes.
Yeah.
I do deserve it.
I do deserve it. I do deserve some ice creams.
Yeah.
I worked hard today.
I worked hard today.
I sat in that chair for a long time.